forward properly. Good morning, dear friends. Thank you for being here. Today is the 14th of Tammuz, July 13th. We're here to study the entire Talmud, one page, one line at a time. Right now it's Masechet Shabbat. We are studying chapter 17, page Kuf Chav Hey Amud Beis 125b. We are studying a segment of the Talmud. I hope you'll agree with me. Quite interesting. Yesterday, just to give a fast recap. Well, first of all, yes, we're dedicating our learning to the wonderful members of the Talmud Chabura who prioritize Torah study, even in a world where there's a lot of conflicting personal, local, and national and international events. And it reminds me, I may have said this before, but David HaMelech in Tehillim, the Torah, Zmiras, song, where your statutes was your Torah. And when I was in, David HaMelech went through a lot, and the Torah was his, were songs for him. And so the Hasidic explanation, well, the literal explanation is that sometimes a good music can help us contain or control our moods, or take us to help transport our imagination and our minds to another place. But elsewhere, it describes that the Torah is Hashem's ratzon and Hashem's communication to the Jewish people, and what extends from that. How was the world created? Also with Hashem's speech. But the Torah is a deeper, higher kind of dibur, a deeper and higher kind of expression of Hashem. And so if we want to get a hold on planet Earth, and the world seems to be going crazy, we can go to the higher source. And that the Kabbalists and the Hasidic masters say is through Torah study. So Torah doesn't just allow us to forget reality. The Torah allows us to tap into a deeper and truer and higher reality, from which the reality that we see when we step outside or turn on our television reflects. And so we're going straight to the power source, but in a safe way. We're not sticking our finger into the outlet or but we're connecting to the Kedusha and to the blessing that the Torah represents. And so I want to dedicate today's learning to our dear members of our Chabura who showed devotion and prioritized Torah over all the other conflicting opportunities and things that are on our heart and minds. And so I rest my case, as they say. So yesterday's Gemara, I think, was actually a very interesting exercise. Well, we discussed a few things, but the initial conversation was to understand the story of the rock, of the stone, and its designation as muksa, with everyone agrees that when it's left by mistake, it can be tipped off, but the question was, what if it's placed on purpose? Placing a stone on purpose can mean one of two things. Either you've intentionally placed a muksa item, and therefore there is no recourse but to leave it there the entire Shabbos, even if wine is underneath that rock, it's muksa. And you intentionally placed a muksa rock on top of your barrel. Your barrel is now entirely subservient. It is a basis, sustaining a truly muksa item, a rock, and now you can't touch the barrel. That's option A. This was, I believe, Rabbah's take. This was, again, I'm just giving a recap. This was, I believe, Rabbah's take. Then you have Rav Yosef's take. He says, no, this was not intended to tell us that the rock makes the barrel off limits. On the contrary, when you place a rock with intention, what you've done is you've undesignated it, well, as a rock, and you've now given it the designation of a useful tool. And so now it is entirely not muksa. Now you've designated it as a keli. The Gemara on the bottom line said, what is exactly the nature of the debate? And the Gemara said something very interesting. We know that there is the power to change a designation, to make something a keli, or to make something in your world, to unmuksa it. Muksa means it's set aside, and you can make it not set aside. The question is, what does it take to make something non-muksa, especially when it's not a keli, it's not a vessel, but it's raw material, which is the ultimate type of muksa? Opinion, there's three options. And Dr. Hammer, I know you weren't here, but I know you'll appreciate this. The option A is machshava. Machshava alone, just a person's intention, just a person's kavana, can transform a rock, which is muksa, raw material, into something that is entirely a keli and entirely not muksa. That's option A. Option B is that machshava alone is not powerful enough to transform a stone into a keli, but if you pick it up and you place it somewhere with intention, well, your actions coupled with your intention and your actions which are demonstrating your intention now designate this stone to be not muksa. Now the stone is a adornment, a cover for a barrel. Option 3 or option C. Machshava is not enough. Intention is not enough. Placement is not enough. You need to actually do a masa. You need to actually modify the stone itself in some way to smooth it, to polish it, to do something that makes the rock, that represents, that there's a change in appearance. There's a change in the rock itself, which is representative of the designation as a keli and non-muksa. Those are 3 different shitot, 3 different viewpoints when it comes to the truest kind of muksa, a rock or another kind of raw material. When it comes to a keli, I just want to add it parenthetically just to remind us, a keli is a little different because you can have a keli that is muksa at malachta le'isr, like a hammer, and yet if you use it for a permitted use, that would be okay. Because a keli is a lesser degree of muksa. Keli, if you recall, we read the evolution of muksa, and at a certain point in the time of Nehemiah, they said that all kelim should be muksa, and then they eased up. And so there are restrictions, but you can also use it. But even before the times of Nehemiah, there were certain things that were truly muksa, and a rock and other raw material would be those instances. And so I think that this was a very interesting exercise and a very interesting presentation of the Gemara on the 3 options of how something might be considered a muksa. So I'll make sure we find that place. Here, this is the line, again, from yesterday. Mar Savar Be'inon Masa, there has to be an action. Umar Savar Loy Be'inon Masa, and Rabbi Yosef says you don't need an action, you just need a placement. So here, Maisa doesn't mean, let me just explain the language. Today, in English, action would be to move a rock, placing a rock. But when we say here action, we don't just mean placement, we mean more than that. We mean something that manipulates or affects the rock. And then we left off, and this is where we closed off, with a very fascinating tale. A story in the time of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, who lives approximately 100 years, or at least his prime. He was 100 years after the fall of the Beis Hamikdash, and he was one a little more than 120. And he's the one who ultimately publishes, edits, and the Mishnah. And they lived in Eretz Yisrael in the north, and they found rocks, and this is where we have the story play out. Rabbi Hanina says that Rebbe told them to just have machshava. And then the story was conveyed a little differently by Rav Ami, who said that he actually wanted them to align them, and Rav Asi, who says that you actually have to polish them and smooth them out. And so in this one little sentence, again, this is the closing paragraph of yesterday's Gemara, we actually have all 3 viewpoints neatly and beautifully conveyed. Reb Menachem, you'll agree with me, because we've introduced some earlier Mishnaic era texts, we get some interesting Hebrew language. For example, would you know that Su'u v'lamdum would mean to arrange them? Oh. So I imagine lamdum probably actually has to do with teaching. And just like teaching, you orient a person's understanding. Again, this is just a guess, but I have a feeling that the word lamdum here means or organize, because it's like teaching. Now I'm going to take a peek in Rabbi Steinsaltz and see if he has anything to share about this, because this is an interesting language. Take a look. Okay, hold on. Let me. I hope you'll indulge me for just another moment. I know we have to go further, but I told you I would spend a moment over here. Let's read Rashi. Let's see if we can make sense of Rashi. And then we're going to read a different take that's brought by Rabbi Steinsaltz, which actually alters the whole meaning of the Gemara. And that's why I want to first make sure we see Rashi well. Sidru otam, organize them. Vehashivum, and place them, or restore them. Kidei shelo nitzarech ligaba. Hold on. All right, let's read this. I might ask you to forget what I said, and let's pretend we're learning this the first time, so we can properly appreciate Rashi. Sijuro tam v'hashivum. Arrange them now. Kidei shelo nitzarech ligabahem l'machar. So you will not need to touch them. Lefi she'ein hazmana b'masa. Action alone is insufficient to make them unmuksa. Ein hazmana b'maisa moy elas la'even la'asoysa kli. Arrangement does not work. Rav Ami l'tamei da'amar le'el ein even nasas kli b'hanacha. Rav Ami is the one who says that placement alone is insufficient to make it on muksa.
I don't understand it. I would assume that
I might have to take back what I said.
I would have assumed that the point is that thought alone is not sufficient, that you have to actually do an action.
That's what that's how I translated it. So if that's what you understood, that's what I understood too. But now I'm reading Rashi again, and I'm noticing that I may have misunderstood it. And so in real time, I'm trying to reorient myself with this teaching, because I'll tell you what I explained. What I said is, Rabbi Yochanan says that there needs to be Maisa. Oh, okay, maybe arrangement. It's
no, Rabbi Yochanan, from what I see, it agrees with what you originally said.
Right. No. Basically, we have
I don't understand Rashi.
Yeah, hold on. I want to explain what I can say with confidence. We have a story of Rebbe. Rebbe commented to his students about stones. That everybody agrees. But from that point on, the story has it forks off. We have Rabbi Chanina's version of the story, which is he instructed them to have machshava. Dr. Hammer, Rabbi Chanina was probably your kind of guy. So Rabbi Chanina says that Rebbe says to have machshava. Su'u v'chashvu, indicating that all that's needed is machshava. That we can say with clarity. There's another version of the very same story, and this is a version conveyed to us not by Rabbi Chanina, but Rabbi Yochanan. Yochanan was also he was the famous sage of the Gemara that lived in Israel. And he was adjacent to the time and presence of Rebbe. And so he has a different interpretation in the story and Rebbe's halacha. He said, Hitzrichu Rebbe lamasa. Rebbe actually warrants action. The question now that we're left with is what is defined as action? And this is where I may have wobbled. I may have made a mistake, and I want to relearn this Gemara with you. And probably what's going to happen is in the end, I'm going to come back and re-agree with myself in the beginning. But for now, you need to break things down before you build them back up. So let's read this again. And again, if I'm confusing you, I apologize. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Hitzrichon Rebbe Lamaisa. Rebbe needed Maisa. My Amar Lahu, how did he communicate that there needs to be Maisa? What did he tell them? Rabbi Ami explained that what he told them was, Tzu'u v'lamdum. Go out and lamdum. Rabbi Steinsaltz translates this as arrange them. And I explained to you why would it mean to arrange them. I told you maybe the way teaching orients and organizes a person's thoughts or a person's idea. That's what I said. Let's read Rashi and see if Rashi has a different take or the same thing. Su'u v'lamdum, go out and lamdum, sidru oisam, organize them. So this part I got right. Rashi is explaining that lamdum means to organize. V'hashivum, and set them up. Kidei shalom, but this is where I'm confused, and I'm learning this with you in real time. Kidei shalom nitzarech ligabahem lemachar, so that they'll be in position for you to sit upon them without you needing to touch them on Shabbos. Lefi she'ein hazmana b'maiseh kol dehu ma'eles, because simple placement kind of action, Simple designation kind of action, minor action. Why is it minor? Because all you've done is placed it somewhere. You haven't done something substantive. So minor action, ein hazmana b'maisa kolduhu, my eles le'evan la'asois lakli. So simple placement doesn't turn it into a kli. So what is Rav Ami saying according to Rashi's interpretation? That Rebbe needs maisa. How do we know? Because he was telling them, arrange it now so you don't need to touch it tomorrow. Because just by arrangement, it remains muksa, and therefore you need to not touch it.
So what would he require? It would require them to actually arrange them and
No,
sit
he
on
was
them
saying arrange them.
and sit on them in order to.
No. Arrange them so that you could sit on them without carrying. Remember, muksa doesn't mean touching. Muksa means carrying or moving. So
I
he's
understand,
arrange
but
it
then he
before
says here
Shabbos.
that any action does not make it a kli. Action alone does not make it a kli.
Which kind of action? Arrangement doesn't make it a kli. So he's saying the rocks remain not a kli. The rocks are off limits to handle. You want to sit on them tomorrow? All the movement, all the arranging has to happen today before Shabbos. Because once Shabbos hits, you're going to have to keep them in their very original arrangement. Because Rav Ami says, Ein even nasis kli bihanacha. Just because you place the stone down, a very nominal placement, that doesn't make it into a kli. Placement alone.
Wait. I may read it a little bit. If you go to the first line, maybe with the hashivum is sit on them.
Sit on them or make them organized to sit.
But maybe it means to sit on them, because just to arrange them does not make it into a kli. Just like Rav Ami says in the end.
Rav Ami says placement.
And placement, just placing it, does not make a stone a kli.
So Rav Ami says placement doesn't work.
Maybe the sidurta v'hashivum, maybe that means and sit on them.
I mean, whatever hashivum means, I think hashivum is a subset of sidru. Put them in their place.
Rashi doesn't use words for no reason.
Correct. Organize and then have them actually positioned. That's how I would translate it. So again, let me explain, because I explained to you the two opinions. I explained it to them to you, these polar opposites. Rav Ami says if you're going to want to have these rocks arranged, you better do it before Shabbos.
I keep losing you.
You're losing me?
I'm also having problems with my
It's my internet. Let me just check my internet.
activity. Yeah.
Testing. All right, let's try
I
again.
hear you, but
Okay.
I think Reb Bernie is frozen.
So it could be that it's can. Oh, Dr. Hammer or a barrel.
I'm sorry, Reb Burrow. It's frozen.
You're saying the kid? It's not his fault. The internet has to travel a whole lot further to get to Canada.
Yeah, I'm on and off.
Listen, we're grateful to have you as much as we can. If the internet cuts out a little bit. So Rav Ami says you want to have the stones to sit on, you better organize them before Shabbos, because you're not allowed to organize them on Shabbos. Now you might think, by virtue of the arrangements you did prior to Shabbos, they now become entirely accessible to you. They're not muksa. He says no. Arrangement, placement does not make something into a keli, doesn't make something non-muksa. That's what Rav Ami says. Now Rashi addresses, by the way, Dr. Stamler, if not for our little Ivrit experiment, I probably wouldn't have revisited the Gemara. I would have gone the rest of my life understanding the Gemara incorrectly. So I'm glad that we decided to revisit. Now Rashi actually addresses our Hebrew language conundrum here. Limdum, lamdum. Since when does this actually mean to organize? And I said it had to do with limud. I'm not certain Rashi is going to agree with me. Kidamrina b'moed katan. So Rashi tells us, take a look in moed katan, where it says, Oselahem limudim, make limudim, which means lisader nisarim al piaber. The word limud means or organized, arranged. I'm going to suspect it is related in the language department to teaching. I'm going to look at Rabbi Steinsaltz in a moment and see if he confirms or denies my impression. As we know in Hebrew, the word limud is to study. Lamdum here means to organize. Does study and organize, or is study and organize synonymous or not? Professor, as a person of education, do you have any perspective on this?
No, I think that the root might have LMD might have a variety of meanings, and there is no contradiction between assigning that a meaning of teaching or assigning the meaning of arrangement. Those are relatively close meanings.
Okay, thank you. So, Dr. Stamler, I think we're almost going to extricate ourselves from this complicated language problem. And now we're going to look at Rabbi Asi's comment, and I'm going to have to revise how I explained Rabbi Asi too. And I'm not embarrassed of my mistake. I think it was actually a very good and well thought out mistake. But Rashi certainly does not agree with my take. So I want to teach it to you the way Rashi's teaching it, and then Rabbi Asi says no. What Rebbe told him was Su'u v'shav shifum. Go out and wipe them down. Rashi minatit, clean off a little mud. Sheyunois leishev, so that they'll be sit worthy. Ulamachar, tomorrow tilamdum. Then you'll be allowed to organize them, because the b'maisa kol dehu nasakli, with the most minor of actions, they become a keli. They become designated as available on Shabbos. They become designated as something you can have on Shabbos. So Rav Asi says, all you got to do is wipe off the shmutz. With the slightest action, you'll indicate that you desire this as your chair, and then tomorrow you can move them around. They're not muksa. So Rav Ami says, putting a stone on a barrel doesn't make the stone a keli, and the barrel remains muksa. Rav Asi says, placement, Maisa koldahu, a minor activity that is sufficient to turn a rock into a keli. And therefore, when it came to the construction site, when it came to the understanding of the story of Rebbe, Rav Ami says you better arrange them before Shabbos, because you're not able to arrange them on Shabbos, and there's nothing minor you could do to make them designated as a keli. Nothing minor. Rav Asi says, nah, just wipe it down a little bit. You've indicated with a minor action. It's kind of like placing. Placing is a minor action. You haven't changed something substantively, but your action indicates your intention, and wiping off does the same. That's my revised take of the Gemara based on Rashi.
Rabbi,
Yes.
maybe it's a silly question. So if it's already Shabbos and you see rocks that you're able to sit on, do
Yes.
you have to worry how it was set up, when it was set up, who was thinking of what they did when they set it up?
If it's in a sitting arrangement,
Yeah.
if it's arranged for sitting, you can probably assume. I don't want to give a halacha lamaisa, but from the perspective of our Gemara, if it's arranged, you could certainly sit on them without moving them. The question becomes, can you move them? And so that's where Rav Ami and Rav Asi would give us different psaks, a different halachic opinion.
No, I guess my question is it the thing itself, or how did it get to be what it is?
You're saying maybe it was naturally arranged in a manner that.
No, if this person is doing it, he's doing it only for himself.
Oh. No, I think once you make it non-muksa, it becomes a kli. I believe that designation would work for for anyone. We're gonna read one more paragraph on the subject, and then I do want to take a fast peek, although we actually saw this already. You know what, we'll do it now. Let's take a look at the Rambam for a moment. Until now we spoke about pardon me. until now, meaning in previous Gemaras, we spoke about a construction site that had bricks that were aligned for construction. Then they were abandoned. They were no longer for construction. We said they became not muksa. That was bricks. Now we're talking about stones that are on a row in a construction site. So here's the Rambam quoting our Gemara. Nidbach shalavanim, a row of stones, shechashav alav mivad yaim, that he had a machshava before Shabbos to use. Im limdum, if he organized them, mutar leishav aleim, you can sit on them. Im lav, but if he didn't arrange them, also he's not allowed to sit on them. Anyone want to take a stab at which opinion the Rambam is taking?
Rav Yochanan.
He's taking Rav Yochanan according to Rav Ami. He's taking a more machmir position, I believe, saying you can sit on them, but they remain muksa. Therefore, you have to arrange them before Shabbos. Im limdum mutar leshav aleim. But maybe not. Maybe the Rambam, hold on. Maybe the Rambam learns our Gemara a little differently. Maybe the Rambam is of the opinion, and I'm thinking aloud, this is dangerous, but maybe the Rambam is of the opinion that if they were muksa, you couldn't even sit on them. And by virtue of arranging them, they become non-muksa. So before we could dig into the Rambam a little further, but let's look at the Shulchan Aruch and see if he has any, he deviates in his language. Here. Chariyot shel dekel. And again, some of these things our Gemara is going to discuss soon. So Chariyot shel dekel, shekotz l'sreifa, wood, which is chopped for fire, muksim heim, but asur l'taltalim. You're not allowed to use them because they are set aside for a specific use as kindling and not as a keli. Yashav aleim ma'at mivad yaim. If he sat on them a little bit, mutar leishav aleim b'Shabbos, then he can't sit on them. Certainly, if you organize them. Even if
the Rambam says this, the Rambam said the same thing later on at the paragraph before that.
Yeah. But here's but what about a row of stones? This is the code of Jewish law. Although he had a affirmative machshava, he wants to, with his machshava, make it accessible. Asur leishev alehem. He cannot sit on them, ella imkain lamdum, unless he organized them before Shabbos, and therefore you can sit on them without any arrangements. But there's a more lenient opinion which says that we treat the stones like the wood, that a more nominal designation should work.
No, it's not a more lenient, it's a more strict.
No. Chariyot wood is easier to redesignate as.
But on the chariyot, on the branches, you actually have to sit. On the stones,
No,
you
he gave three options. So like this. Yashav alei ma'at mutar.
You have to actually sit.
You have to sit on them. You couldn't just arrange them. Correct. So here we're saying, I hear what you're saying. So we need to do a little more iyun. We need to explore a little further. You're right. And we're about to see the Chariyot shel dekel, so maybe we should hold on. One more thing. Kedushay. There are Taisus, Oh, there was a Taisus. Hold on. Taisus asked a good question. I don't know if I'm going to give you the answer, but I want to show you the question. Tema, this Gemara doesn't sit right. There's a problem here. How can you claim that Rav Asi is consistent with his viewpoint? The Rabbi Pligi. On the contrary, his assertion here is in contradiction with his earlier opinion. The Hachakam Rav Asi here, he says, Nasa kisa lechaves b'nacha greda. Simple placement makes it a kli. Beloy shum ma'aseh. Without any action. Placement is not an action according to Taisus. I think Rashi says that placement is part of the genre of action. Here, Rav Asi says you can't just place it. You have to also do something to improve it. Amalahen dahainu maisa suvish shafshafum amalahem dahainu maisa sheitzrichon Rebbe. This is a powerful question. This is what was bothering me, I think, from the outset, and why I didn't interpret the Gemara as it initially did. We're going to have other standards. Let me see if I can fast forward to the answer. All right, we'll see. The question is good. We'll hold on to the question. Now let's continue the Gemara and see if we get any clues. So just to recap again, we have a machloikas Rav Ami and Rav Asi. Rav Ami essentially says no nominal action or placement is going to make it on muksa. Rav Asi says with some small action you could make it not muksa. Rav Ami being more machmir, being more restrictive. Rav Asi being more lenient. The way I understood the Gemara and the way I understand the Shulchan Aruch and the Rambam, when he says Su'uv el-Amdum, he's saying organize it because you're not going to be able to move them on Shabbos. They are muksa. But if it's in the right position, you can sit on them. I was doubtful if the Rambam maybe learns the Gemara a little differently, but for now, I'm going to hold this as my opinion. Folks, if you're feeling confused, I apologize. Now let's just learn. Let's look at the next Gemara straightforward. Itmar, a teaching associated with events, story that we just mentioned. Rav Yossi ben Shaul Omar. There's now going to be another debate about the exact nature of the stones. Rav Yossi ben Shaul says it wasn't stones. Sivar shel kairais hava. It was a stack of beams. Not stone, wood. Rashi. Sivar shel kairais hava v'lo yavanim. It wasn't stones at all. What is Savar? Seder shel korot chadashot, an arrangement of new beams. Shemisadrin oisan lebinyan kidei shelo yitakmu, and you organize them neatly so that they don't get bent. I'm imagining you go to Home Depot, and you can get like one of those. If you want to get 2x4s, you can get like a whole, package of those woods. They all come in a little thing, maybe like 6 or 9 of them, with a plastic. That's what I'm imagining. Probably a little larger, but that's what I have in mind. That's what Yossi ben Shaul, Rabbi Yossi ben Shaul says. Rabbi Yochanan ben Shaul says, Rabbi Yochanan ben Shaul disagrees. Gashosh shel safina hava. These were actually wooden beams that were used by a ship in ancient times. What is a geshosh? We actually had this before in our Gemara, if you may recall. Eitz aroch, a very long pole, which is used to probe the depth of the water in front of the boat, Leida Shuva Amko, to understand, to be certain that the water is deep enough, so that the boat can go on. Today, you have a GPS, you can actually scan the depth of the water. In those days, you didn't have a technology, but you had a pole that you would put out and make sure that the boat could travel forward. I imagine you didn't need to use this in the high seas, but when you're going into a harbor, you're going to dock, you would then use that to be certain of the depth of your boat. Gishosh, what's the difference if it's random poles or a pole for a ship? Man da Amar Gishosh, if you say that it was one of those poles, Kol Shekain Savar, you would certainly agree that you could be more lenient to allow sitting on a stack of wood. But if you say that it was a stack of wood, you might think that maybe this pole is a highly specialized, precise stick, and you don't want people just sitting on it. Why wouldn't you want people sitting on it? So it should not become crooked. So this, when you put aside, you really intend for it to remain off limits. Even according to the most lenient of Muksa opinions, would agree that such a post If it's a highly specialized item, you don't want the kids playing with it, so it remains muksa. What are the implications of these new opinions? I guess these rabbis would have a different take on the stones. Maybe they would either they just don't use this text as a source, or maybe they have a different take. But anyways, for the fullness of the record, we include different opinions. So basically, what do we have over here? This is a very interesting instance. I'm not going to tell you exactly what to make of this, but we have a tradition, a story, an important story.
Rabbi.
About Rebbe, hold on, a Rebbe interacting with his students and teaching them laws of muksa. Straightforward story. Except, apparently, maybe with the passage of time, the exact details of the story are not clear, and every minor variation of the story would have vast halachic implications. And either I don't want to use the word broken telephone, but either the broken telephone aspects of the story influence the opinions of Rav Amir and Ravasi, or, and this is what I'm more inclined to think, based on different traditions and the laws of Shabbos, that informed the way the story was recalled, reflective of their opinion. Either way, this is an interesting exercise. And I guess it shows us, and I want to be very careful here, but it is evidence of the occasional challenge of an oral tradition. But what I'll say is like this: these kind of instances, I believe, are an exception which proves the rule. Meaning the Gemara is unafraid and is desirous to record and preserve even the ambiguity of a story. Both so that when we're considering the halacha, we have the most access to information, but also I believe the Gemara is entirely comfortable telling us, in this instance, we have a story, but the story was just 2 lines, and maybe the original story, the way it was conveyed, didn't include all the details. And now with conjecture, we can kind of impose and use it to support varying halachic traditions about the details, the nuances of the laws of muksa.
Rabbi.
Yes, Rabbi.
We had one other criteria that we glossed over, and I'm wondering why. It was, I think, the palm leaves. If he sat on them before,
because we didn't get to the hold on, I'll tell you why. We didn't discuss it. We didn't discuss it in its primary source, so I didn't want to go after. I just read it in passing in the Shulchan Aruch, but we're about to see that instance. We're about to see the discussion of the palm branch, I believe. Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. So that was one of the criteria, that he sat on it before, then it changes its status. Why doesn't it hold for the other stuff?
So that's actually a beautiful introduction to the next Gemara. So Beryl is basically telling us very wisely that we have a lot that is not yet entirely clear. For instance, what would be the deal with other material? Is there something unique about stones? Is there something uniquely muksa about stones? What about firewood? What about other items? And so the Gemara is right away going to proceed and share with us that facet of the conversation. Zumaira Shikshura. So now you may recall our Mishnah mentions that you have a vine branch, which is muksa. It's raw material. It's definitely not a keli. But if it's affixed to a vessel used to draw water, now it becomes part of the keli. Now it is not muksa. The Mishnah says, Shehi Keshura, it's tied. Shura in. Like shura law, if it's tied, it's considered a keli, but when it's not tied, it's not considered a keli. Rashi shenik shura loy, afilo yesh akmumius beroisha kein mazleg shiroi litlois boy tafiach ulemalois chishav aleh. Hold on, Dr. Stammer, you want to help me out over here? I need your help. Afilo yesh akmumius beroisha, even if it's crooked or forked like a fork, so you can use it to hang without tying. So I imagine maybe there's like a slip knot that you can kind of loop it in without tying. Does that sound accurate, doctor? You're muted. Hold on. Oh, and I just muted you again. I'm sorry. I was trying to unmute you. I hit here. We don't hear you. Okay.
I wasn't listening for a minute. Did you ask me a question?
Oh, you're asking a question? Yeah, I wanted to ask you a question. I was
Go ahead.
asking you, the Gemara says it was tied. Shura in like Shura line. It's tied, then it's not muksa. But if it's not tied, it is not muksa. So Rashi says, what does it mean it's not tied? If it's not tied, is it in the picture? Or is it in the picture? What does it look like that it's not tied? So Rashi tells us it's not tied, but it is somehow functionally working alongside the picture. But it's not tied, it's not fused. So that's what I was asking you, your opinion on this Rashi. Even if the end of the vine is twisted or
It's like a fork, it says.
leg, like a fork, it's not a straight line. So you can hang something upon it. So he has the vine servicing the pitcher, and he has intention, but still, says the Gemara, like Yeshua Allah, it would not be not muksa, even though it's doing the function, but it's not fused. Lema masnisim, we must conclude that our Mishnah is the loy ki Rabban Shimon Gamliel, not consistent with the viewpoint of Rabban Shimon Gamliel. What does Rabban Shimon Gamliel say? You got to take a peek, but this is going to answer Rebbero's question. The Tanya here is a brisa that says, Chariyos shal dekel, branches, palm branches, shegedaron leitzim, that they were organized and chopped down for wood. And now he has a change of heart, a change of mind. They were organized for firewood, which is entirely muksa because you can't light a fire. And so they're set aside till after Shabbos when you're making fire again. But he changed his mind. V'nimlach aleim liyeshiva, he changed his mind and intends to use it as a chair to sit. It's probably inaccurate to say that they're going to use it as a chair, but to use it as a sitting mat or something. Sarich likshar, Erev Shabbos, when you change your mind, if you want its designation to be altered, you need to actually tie them together. Rashi, Sarich likshar, the Erev Shabbos, obviously before Shabbos, you can't tie them on Shabbos. So changing your mind alone does not determine its designation to a non-muksa. Machshava alone doesn't work. Rabban Shimon Gamliel says no. Ein sarich likshar. There is no need to tie them. Your machshava, your intention, your kavanah is sufficient. Dr. Hammer, you might recall better than I do. I think we've had in the past Rabban Shimon Gamliel also expressing the power of machshava. I don't remember exactly the citation, but I recall having such conversations in the past. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, machshava kamase.
Right. And so we have a machlokes about wood. Does it need to be organized or does machshava work? Let's go back a moment. We have a zemaira, which is not tied, and we said it doesn't work. And if it is tied, it does work. So probably the Gemara says Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel would disagree with our Mishnah. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel would say, I don't mind if it's tied or not. All that matters is machshava. You intend, and even more so, you actually implement using it as part of a water drawing mechanism. Well, then it should not be muksa.
Rabbi,
Yes.
they're leaving out the key part because when we first discussed it, it said that had he been sitting on it before.
No, hold on. We read the Shulchan Aruch in passing. We're now seeing the basis for the Shulchan Aruch. So we have to finish this reading, and then we'll see exactly where each of the ideas in the Shulchan Aruch come from. So
No,
basically,
but in the Gemara it said that he sat on it before.
So I did Talmud teaching malpractice, and I do this a lot by showing you the Shulchan Aruch, which is the finished product that's after the entire Gemara has been studied and organized. But now we need to forget about it.
Are you sure it wasn't from the Gemara?
Absolutely certain. It was on the side column here from the Shulchan Aruch. And
Okay.
Bli Neder, when we finish,
I defer to you on many bases, age, etc., etc., etc.
no, I just have the bully pulpit. I hit the mute button. So
Imagine if they would have a thing to mute them in the Talmud. We'd have nothing to read.
you know what? It's actually, I know you're kidding, but you know the famous story about when Rabbi Gamliel was removed as the head of the academy and Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah was temporarily installed. So you remember the story? What happened? Rabbi Gamliel put a guard by the door, and it only let very, very highly qualified students. And the Torah was desolate. And it says that when Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah took over, he opened the lock and he put extra rows, and so many more students were introduced into the high academy. And there were so many halachas that were unclear that suddenly were able to be clarified because of the accessibility. And so I think the Talmud makes the case that a mute button or a guard by the door is not always a great idea. I'm sure you'll agree. Now let's see the rest of the Gemara, and let's see, I believe, where we'll come into the sitting. And if it's not there, then I'm going to owe you a big apology. And I just might have to. Amar Rav Sheshes says, Afilu Temer Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. Even it's plausible that Rabbi Shimon Gamliel would agree with our mission. What's the difference between a vine and firewood? What is the context of the vine attached to the thing to draw water? The vine is actually still attached to the ground, and therefore a vine attached to the ground to be allowed to handle, it's going to need to be super designated as non-muksa. Gemara says, no, this cannot work. It means that he's making use of something that is attached to the ground. And as Rashi points out, even if it was tied, it should be asur because you're not allowed to use something that is mechuber lekarka. So Gemara says, no. It's not literally the mechuber lekarka. L'mata mishleisha. Samach lekarka. It's close to the ground. Oh, so it's attached to the ground, but it's very low down. There's a unique gezerah about a vine that it needs to be tied because tying happens before Shabbos. And we want to make sure that the only way to use a vine is if it's absolutely clear that you're going to have to do it before Shabbos, because you're not allowed to uproot a plant on Shabbos. We're afraid that you're going to cut it, and therefore we made a decree that you have to tie it, and machshava alone doesn't work. And Rabbeinu, I'm going to owe you an apology in one regards. We didn't mention sitting on it before Shabbos in the context of the vine. Let us fastly take a peek back in the Shulchan Aruch and review what we read. Well, we're going to go to the Rambam first. Hold on. We'll get there. Hold on. Here. A row of stones you had in mind to sit on them. If you organize them, you can sit on them. To me, this reads that the organizing makes it not muksa. But maybe simply saying you can't organize them on Shabbos. So I'm a little bit uncertain about the language of the Rambam, even though the Rambam is very much reflective of our mission. But now let's go to the second. Wood that was organized to be firewood. And then he changed his mind. They are not muksa. Why? Because it looks like we're passing like Rabbi Gamliel. That machshava alone works. And similarly, if you sat on them in the daytime, you can carry them. Why? So I stand corrected. Our Gemara doesn't talk about yeshiva here, but sitting is it expresses the fullness of intention. if you sit on it on Erev Shabbos, you're actively indicating that you don't see this as firewood anymore and you see it as a chair. And so sometimes designation happens purely in machshava, but maybe even more powerfully, you can have a machshava that gives clarity or indicates what the maisa. I'm sorry, you have a maisa which clarifies the machshava.
So, Rabbi, we can
Yes.
ask the Shaila the other way. Why in our story didn't he just say, go sit on it, instead of all the other options?
Because apparently, as we're going to see, apparently there is a higher, more strict standard about avonim than about wood. Because wood has a natural use. I believe, this is my belief, I may be wrong, but wood has a natural function as sitting material. And stones are not instinctively considered as such. I may be wrong, but that's my impression. So we're learning halacha chaf aleph. If we lose it, I can look for it. Hold on, open. Here. This is the Rambam. Nidbach shalavonim shachashav al commentary.
Yeah, background noise.
Yeah, bear with me a moment. Here we go. All right, I'm going to hit mute all, but just as a refresh, we're going to ask everyone to unmute to engage in this process. All right, so this is again the Rambam based on our Gemara commenting about stones. The way to make them non-muksa is to organize them. Limdumi b'odyam. And then we have the second halacha, which is about the firewood, which we just read. The Magid Mishnah says, okay, hold on. I'm sorry, folks. Bear with me just a moment.
What?
Sorry, just I'm scanning over here. So basically, Rebberal, actually, some of the commentaries asked the question: is there an inconsistency between the halacha of the nidbach and the halacha of the wood? Because by the nidbach you have to arrange it, and by the wood machshava is enough.
Rabbi,
Yes.
you differentiated between wood and stone. And the question is, today we have other materials. So we have plastic, we have metal, we have aluminum. Would there be a difference between an aluminum folding chair or table and a wooden folding chair or table that you want to use on Shabbos all of a sudden because you have more guests or
I'll
whatever?
I'll tell you the important distinction, and it's a good question. A chair, no matter the material, is very clearly and absolutely for a chair. And so there's no machshava needed. Its design indicates that it is exclusively, I don't want to say exclusively, it's clear that it's a keli and it's for sitting. And now it's not raw material, and it's a whole nother conversation than here. Here we're talking about raw material. How do you turn a raw material into a keli? And here the Rambam is representing without any problem a tension in the halachic in our Gemara. Because when it comes to stone, which is a raw material, he says there needs to be some kind of organization. When it comes to wood, the Rambam is saying that machshava is enough. And Rebberal had this question, and I think we're having this question here, both in the Gemara, but in the Gemara you can see there's different opinions, but the Rambam codifies it in this way. And so the Magid Mishnah here asks this question, and Rebberal, I want to show this to you. Yesh l'tumoya al Rabbeinu. We have a problem with the Rambam. Lama pasak lamala command the matzrich maisa. Shekosov im limdum. Why does the Rambam here say that you need to do limdum, as opposed to wood, where machshava is enough? So the Magid Mishnah's answer is Shadas Rabbeinu. The shani chariyos. The wood is different. The ikad the kameli shiva, the ikad the kameli eitzim. because this wood is just as probably used for sitting as for firewood. I think I was mechaven to his explanation. The only reason why the wood is prohibited is because there was an affirmative negative thought. There was an affirmative thought that it's going to be firewood. If it's left at neutral, then it's not muksa. Therefore, machshava works. When it comes to stones, the default setting is not that it's a chair. And therefore, machshava is not enough. Machshava is enough to restore something to the factory settings. The factory settings of the wood is that it's multi-purpose. When it comes to stone, the default setting is not the yeshiva.
Rabbi?
Yes, doctor.
Uh,
You hear me? Doctor? Anyone else hear me? Beryl, give me a thumbs up if you hear me.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear
Okay,
you.
go ahead.
Maybe he was talking to someone else, Barrett.
No. Well, I mean, actually, I don't know, but he said rabbi, so I'm assuming he was trying to talk to us.
Oh, okay.
Hold on. Also here, the Or Sameach, for example, here explains the Gemara. Hello?
Yeah, oh, okay.
Oh, Dr.
I was disconnected for a while. I had a question. I don't know if it's...
Go ahead, please.
No, just to follow up and bring in functional fixedness.
Oh.
So all chairs are chairs. Okay, but now we have cardboard containers on the side and we have milk boxes. And you have a kiddush and you need more seating for people.
So that's actually a very good question. That is possibly where this Gemara would have a contemporary application. The reason why I'm only saying possibly, and I would have to do some research, is because a milk carton is a keli. It's not raw. And cardboard too is not really raw. So we have to think of an instance of a raw item that would have this kind of flexibility or non-flexibility. And so what we would probably come up with is a tree stump. But a tree stump might be a very, very good parallel for our instance here. It might be too good of a parallel, so it wouldn't be an analogy. It might be the meaning of the Gemara, right? Because a tree stump can be used, especially if you're camping, can be used as a chair. But it also just as likely is for kindling. Now, if you split it, then there's no questions. But if it's still whole, so we can probably work through that. That would probably be a good instance. I'm trying to think of another example of a raw material that's not a keli that we would have this kind of question.
Rabbi,
I just want to show you one thing. When I read you the Rambam, I told you I'm not certain what the Rambam is saying. And I'm going to close with this. A row of stones that you had a machshava. If you organized it, you can send it. You can't send it. So I wasn't sure if the Rambam is trying to say different than the Gemara. If the Rambam is trying to say that by organizing it becomes non-muktzah. Or he was saying, practically, if you arrange it as a seat, you'll have a seat. If you don't arrange it as a seat, you're not going to have a seat and you cannot change it. I'm not certain everyone learns the Rambam this way, but the Or Sameach says, Or Sameach, I think, was the Rav Meir Simcha of Dvinsk. It's a famous Gaon. And he explains the Gemara, the Rambam, the way I wanted to explain the Rambam. So I just want to show it to you. Mutar leishav aleim, aval betiltul aser. It remains muksa. So he explains the way I explained it. If you don't arrange it, you're not going to have a seat. Don't think that it's not muksa. If we had more time, we don't, I would be curious to scan through the other commentaries in the Rambam to see if they learn the Rambam the same way. My dear friends, this concludes today's Gemara. I want to thank you for indulging me a little bit here as I try to give a sampling of branching past the text of the Gemara to feel through the halachic conversation. We're not done yet, but I just want to give a very, very fast recap. Today we talked about, well, I reopened yesterday's Gemara and showed how I may have missed. How I may have misread the Gemara yesterday. I reread it, which actually reminds me, I owe you one thing. Hold on for another minute. Lam Dum. Steinsaltz. Some commentaries explain this phase to mean not organize, but learn to identify them. So there are some commentaries from the Gaonim, and the Rabbi Steinsaltz brings that lamdun means literally learn them. Each student should choose a specific stone, identify it, and by utterly calling your stone, now it is not muksa. This is a big chiddush, and we understand why the Rashi doesn't use that, but just for the fullness of the record. So we closed out yesterday's Gemara, and then we continue the story with two other versions of the tale where it was not stones, but it was wood. Then we introduced the discussion about firewood. Is machshava alone enough? Is action enough? Rav Shimon Gamliel generally says machshava is good, but there's a reason to differentiate between firewood, where you don't need to have a machshava, and the vine. Maybe the vine, because it's attached, or because people will come to think you can detach vines, maybe that was a reason to be momachmer. My dear friends, this concludes today's Gemara session. Thank you all so very much. We wish everyone a wonderful day. Shalom Bar Chumash. In just a moment, I'll hit end. And then you're welcome to rejoin the study today's Chumash. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope to see everybody tomorrow. Gesundheit and Freilich. And again, thank you all for making, with your questions and comments and participation, making this a very, very special Talmud Chabura.
Thank you. Thank you.